Somewhere near where you live, there's an animal that knows your face, not your smell, not your coat, not the sound of your car, your face. You have walked past it, probably this week. A bird on a wire that did not fly off when you passed, and did not stop watching you either. You never gave it a second thought. It gave you one. And here's the strange part. If that animal ever decided you were a problem, there's a good chance it has already told the others. Which sounds ridiculous, so how would anybody ever prove it? Start with the easy part. In Cambridge, researchers trained 8 sheep to recognize photographs of celebrities. The sheep got it right about 8 times out of 10 and still managed it when the photographs were tilted. Then came the part nobody trained them for. The researchers showed them a photograph of their own handler. The sheep picked him out about 7 times in 10. Nobody taught them that face, but a sheep sees a man every morning. That could just be familiarity. To really test this, you need an animal with no reason to care about you, and you have to strip away everything except the face. No smell, no clothes, no walk. Somebody did exactly that with a rubber mask. In 2006, a wildlife biologist at the University of Washington bought a caveman mask. His name is John Marsloff. He studies crows, and he wanted to know something that sounds simple and is not. Can a crow recognize one specific human being? Because a crow watching you has 100 things to go on. Your jacket, your height, the way you walk, any of those could explain a reaction. None of them are a face. That is what the mask solves. A mask can be worn by anybody. Tall, short, man, woman. A stranger the birds have never seen. Everything changes except the face. So Marsloff and his students put it on, caught 7 crows on the Seattle campus with a net, weighed them, banded their legs, and let them go. Unharmed, but badly frightened. That was the point. They also needed a control. So a second person walked the same paths on the same days wearing a rubber mask of Dick Cheney, who was the vice president at the time. The crows, for the record, had no problem with him. Before the trapping, almost nothing happened. Fewer than 1 crow in 20 bothered scolding the caveman. Afterwards, up to 2/3 of them did. Not just calling, mobbing, diving at the head of whoever wore it. The Cheney mask, walking the same paths on the same days, got almost nothing. Then they started taking it apart. They put the mask on different people. Different heights, different ages, different walks. The crows did not care. Same mask, same reaction. They put a hat on it, covering half the face. Still scolded. And then they did the thing I cannot stop thinking about. They wore it upside down. The crows still scolded it. And to see it properly, some of them tilted their own heads over. That is the whole finding in one image. The bird is not matching a pattern. It has decided that thing is a face, and it is turning its head to look at the face the right way up. Which means the bird on the fence outside your window is not simply looking at you. It is checking. Observers who had no idea what the study was testing watched the same walks and reported the same thing. So it works. But the 7 birds they caught cannot explain what happened next. Marsloff kept walking the campus in that mask, and the number of angry birds kept climbing. On one walk, he counted 53 crows. 47 of them scolded him. 7 were ever caught. So, where did the other 40 come from? Here is the first clue. The very first bird to come at him after the experiment was unbanded. He had never touched it. It had learned from somewhere else that this face was a problem. At one of the sites, about 1 crow in 5 reacted shortly after the trapping. 5 years later, it was 3 in 5. The number of birds who hated that face was still going up, years after anyone had been caught. Researchers found young crows scolding the mask whose parents had scolded it first. Learned from a parent, not from experience. But here's the part almost nobody mentions. The birds who had actually been caught could tell the dangerous mask from a harmless one very precisely. The birds who learned it secondhand could not. They were angrier and they were worse at it. The story got blurrier every time it was passed on. Hold on to that one. It matters later. So why would a bird spend anything on this? Because we are the one animal a crow cannot read. We look the same whether we are throwing bread or throwing rocks. The face is the only part of us that tells one human from another. And it is not only birds. 6 dogs, awake inside an MRI scanner, turned out to have a patch of brain that responds to human faces more than to almost anything else. The crow study went further. They put crows in a scanner, awake, and showed them the 2 masks. When a crow looked at the face that had caught it, the scan lit up in the amygdala, the thalamus, the brainstem. In you, those are the regions that handle fear. Specifically, fear you learned, where something becomes frightening because of what it did to you once. When the same bird looked at the face that had fed it, a completely different set of regions came on. Reward, motivation, and looking at the face that caught it, the crow went still and stopped blinking. That is not a bird doing a bird thing. That is your circuitry, running in a brain that split from yours 300 million years ago. Now I want to be straight with you about what we do not know. Nobody can tell you whether a crow sees a face the way you do. It might be recognition as you would understand it, or it might be a very good memory for one distinctive pattern that happens to be shaped like a head. The head tilting points one way. It does not settle it. The dog result is contested too. A later study went looking for sensitivity to the inside of the face, the eyes and the nose and the mouth, and did not find it. And all of this was masks and photographs, controlled and artificial on purpose. Real faces age. They grow beards. They change. What nobody disputes is that it happened. What nobody can explain is how a bird did it. So what happened to the grudge? Marzluff kept walking. Twice a year, same mask, same campus, for the better part of 2 decades. Year 1, a handful of birds. Year 3, more. Year 5, more again. By year 7, about half of every crow he passed was screaming at him. 7 had ever been caught. None of the others had any reason to know him at all. Then it started to come down. A few less each year, and in September of 2023, 17 years in, he walked that campus and wrote in his notebook that he had passed 16 crows. Not one of them cared. He has written that this came about a year after the last crow he personally caught in that mask died. Look at the shape of that. It spread to birds who were never there. It got less accurate every time it was passed on, and it lasted exactly as long as one bird who had actually been there was still alive to insist on it. That is not a fact about crows. That is what happens to any story carried by people who were not there. It travels further than the event. It loses detail at every handover, and it dies with the last witness. Somewhere out there, something may be holding on to your face, and it will keep it for exactly as long as one particular animal is still alive to remember why. If you like the strange side of being human, there is a lot more of it buried in here.